Once you were old enough, what were the dark family secrets you were finally let in on? Not very much a secret. But took me until I was older to understand what was happening. My mom would sometimes have us play a game called Army, which consisted of me, my mom, and my siblings army crawling around our apartment. Kind of a hide-and-seek style game. She would yell, "Hit the deck," randomly, and we would all drop and find a hiding spot. We would giggle and giggle while my mom army crawled around looking for us. We loved the game so much. I realized a few years ago while retelling the story that we lived in a really terrible neighborhood. And she would yell it out when she heard gunshots outside the building. I'm assuming she was worried about stray bullets. Undefined. When I was about 10, my cousin and his dad died. I always thought it was an accident and on the same day. When I was old enough, I was told that his dad actually committed suicide and my cousin followed him couple months later. Truly devastated me, although I didn't know them well. Undefined. My uncle is believed to have murdered 2 Australian police officers in the late 80s. That my cousin was actually my half-brother. Mom got pregnant in college and my aunt and uncle adopted him. And that my dad wasn't my biological father. Mom and dad got divorced. She got pregnant by another man. And my dad wasn't able to have kids of his own, so they got remarried and he raised me as his own. Not so much let in on, as we found out by accident. But apparently my dad's first love and him got into a serious car crash when he was 25 and she died. He lived with her father for years after her death. He still occasionally comes to visit my dad. Even 30 years later. We were always told he was a mentor until my sister pressed my mom on the subject. One of my sisters is even named after the girl that died, middle name, and we never even knew about her until last year. None of us have ever brought it up with him. My friend was engaged to his first love in their early 20s when she passed from cancer. 10 years later, he got married to an amazing woman who honored his late fiancé in their wedding ceremony. Not a dry eye in the place. The reason I had a live-in babysitter when I was 5 that moved in at 2 a.m. was because my mom's cousin killed 2 kids and we ended up harboring his daughter during the trial. He's the only person on death row in my county. My grandma retired and she still decided to work for her brother in his restaurant to save up money for when she dies. Funerals are, obviously, expensive. She insisted he would hold on to her paychecks and pay for her funeral when she dies. He never did. That my favorite cousin wasn't missing. All I knew growing up, he was 13 years older than me, was that he would come and go a lot. He lived with us when I was a baby, and after he moved out he would visit every 6 months or so out of the blue. But we never visited him or called him. His visits were one of my favorite things in the world. I loved him like a brother. By the time I was a teenager I did understand that he had issues with his parents. They had kicked him out at 13 and my parents took him in. But that kind of childhood messes with you. In between visits to my parents he avoided the rest of the family. Moved a lot. And didn't hold jobs for long. Which is why my parents didn't always know where he was. But in my later teens he stopped coming over at all. I asked repeatedly if anyone had heard from him and I was told no. I asked about contacting him and was told no one had a number or address for him. He would come around when he felt like it. But it stretched on for years. I really worried he was dead. And I really missed him. In my later 20s I finally found out that everyone knew where he was the whole time. He was in prison for murder. From what I hear it was actually somewhat justified. He was defending his new wife, who I never got to meet. I also found out some super spooky things about how the extended family sided with his peeped-up parents and refused to help him or his wife when he got arrested. And that they shamed my dad into not helping either. I tried to send a message to him in prison, but I don't know if he ever got it. I wish he knew that I didn't turn my back on him for decades like everyone else did. I just didn't know. My grandparents spent some time in lockup after my grandpa killed their newborn in a shell-shock-induced frenzy. They were jailed because they buried her body in a cave and tried to hide it. My mom and her siblings were all adopted out very young and went back to their parents around 11 years or so later. I knew that growing up, but didn't know why until I was older. To put it shortly, my family tree is more like a very long branch. Yes, we have the genetic defects to prove it. My cousins used to stay with us a lot. I remember my male cousin was just a small baby when he first came to us. He would scream and scream and scream all night. And Mom put him in my room, so I used to spend the night cuddling him or playing peekaboo. My other cousin was my age 5 at the time. I found out later. My auntie was a heroin addict and a sex worker. My cousins were the result of clients, and my male cousin was actually born whilst my auntie was heavily using and he was going through withdrawal after his birth. My grandparents ended up flying in from Wales and taking custody of them, as well as putting my auntie on a plane and leaving with all of them. It was one of the saddest days of my life that I never understood. I thought they were going to be my brother and sister and wasn't sure why all of a sudden they were taken from me. Undefined. My uncle wasn't missing a ton of birthday parties, family reunions, holiday dinners, etc. when I was a kid because of his really busy job. But because he became a heroin addict after his wife took off with their daughter. My cousin, who I've still never met. Undefined. My dad's sister had a secret daughter that would have been approximately his age. She was 16 years older than him. And the family didn't tell him until he was in college. In their small town, there is a not zero chance he could have did date his niece. Undefined. That my grandpa molested all the women in our family. Not just me. And they let it happen because that's just what you do. My parents led me to believe that my grandfather on my mother's side had died due to a heart attack. A year later they revealed he actually shot himself in the head. My cousins lived with us for a while and we thought that was fun because it's like a sleepover every day. One time our mom even took us out of school to pick them up. I learned later that it was because Child Protective Services took my cousins away from their mom because of mental health issues. My mom offered to take her sister's kids until she got her mental health back in order. My cousins live with their mom now and their mom is in a much better condition mentally. My step-grandfather molested my 3 aunties. My eldest sister and possibly my other sister and cousin. Only found out when my nana was dying 11 years after he died. They are buried side by side and I cannot bring myself to go visit my nana because he is there also. Undefined. For those saying my nana had to have known. I have discussed this at length with my auntie and we are certain she didn't. She worked nights for many years and my aunties all have told each other they would never have told her as they wanted to protect her. My grandma actually legally disowned my mother for marrying my dad. The family house was supposed to go to my mom. But after the disowning, Grandma didn't say who she wanted house to go to. Resulting in a decades-long family feud that has split the family even to this day. Sad thing is, my parents actually ended up divorced after 20 years of marriage. Mom took care of my grandma till the end and was the one who handled the funeral arrangements when my grandma passed 2 years ago. She never asked for the house back. It's worth millions. Nobody told me any of this until I was 30.